Hello and welcome to today's webinar with Penny Power OBE. This will form part of our growing online webinar ranging from putting ventures under the spotlight in our Feet to the Fire series to more general investor knowledge with those who have been there and done that. If you'd like to see our previous webinar recordings, you can do so by clicking onto the Stakeholderz video library in the email you'll receive following today's event. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate. You may have joined the webinar listening using your computer's speaker system by default. If you prefer to use your phone, just select phone call in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to today's panelist by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them either during or after the Q&A session. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the person who's putting the questions to Penny, Dermot Hill, Director of Stakeholderz.
Good morning, everyone. So just a couple of words, if I might, about Stakeholderz, an equity funding platform. We operate in the arguably quite impressive funding gap of 300,000 to $1 million. And we have now got a very significant number of UK business angels signed up to invest into technology ventures. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Penny Power to this Fireside Chat series. And she's going to be talking today with me about her wonderful book, Business is Personal. So perhaps we could move to the questions next. So Penny, first of all, what led you to write this book? Why is, for you, business so personal?
Well, that's sort of a journey in a minute, but 22 years of being an entrepreneur, and I'm 55 now. When I wrote the book when I was 50, towards the end of my 53rd year, and I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because the concept I came up with, Ecademy, wasn't something where I thought I'm going to go mega with this. It was something where I saw a need in the market and I had emotional drivers to bring Ecademy to market. And I discovered all sorts of things about myself on that journey, which, having spent the last 22 years supporting small businesses, resonated a lot with other people like me. And it was a lot about the mental and emotional aspect of running a business. And my second business that I got investors in, the lady who was the major investor had a place where she was able to put somebody on the board, and without really giving me any respect on whether I would get on with that person. And the first meeting with that particular person, she said to me, "Joe, Penny, I don't need to like you. It's just business, it's not personal." And as someone who was building and always put so much of myself into a business and believes in ethics and values and shared values and attitudes, that really hit me to the core. And so several years later, when I decided to write this book, that became the heading of the book, because I do believe business is personal. And I think that people need to be allowed to say that. I think that's very important.
I agree. So what's fascinating about your book, there's 12 chapters. 9 of them have actually got the word personal in the chapter. And the other 3 are very revealing indeed about things like loneliness. And so what I think we're going to do in the next sort of 35-40 minutes is to actually talk about some of the content. But I'd like to take your mind back to February 1997 to Pizza Express in Farnham, when you first came up with the idea of Ecademy, because I think that just sets it in context, and then perhaps we could then talk through the journey that you've had to present day indeed, and just dwell on 1 or 2 of the points as we go through. So what was it like when you had that epiphany moment over a pizza? Interesting.
So I know you have lots of people listening now, and others will listen to this, and I think I want to create a little bit of relatable content around that, which is, we have all now been through over 20 years of the internet, and whilst it's connected us beautifully in many, many ways and opened up so many opportunities, it has also created vast anxiety, vast stress, and vast loneliness. And so I got a sense of that when I was sitting in that Pizza Express with my 3 young children under 5, and Thomas, my husband, and still my soulmate and husband. And at the time, he was working on e-commerce and e-procurement projects, helping American firms come into the UK and set up, helping them find investors and build the infrastructures. And I wasn't really working. I'd pulled away from the IT world, where I'd been a sales and marketing director of a fairly large distributor. And I was doing a bit of interim stuff. But I was listening to him with a lot of curiosity, because when I had left the business world properly, 5 years previously, we didn't have email, we didn't have the internet, you know, and so it was really escalating very fast. And I was noticing in him how busy he was getting, but also how isolated he was becoming. And so over that lunch in Pizza Express, I just said to him, you know, this world, you know, I'm not excited by the internet because it's another sales channel. At the end of the day, businesses survive and grow, and yeah, they morph and adapt. But what I was really curious was the emotional impact on people. And I don't know why. I think I've always been led emotionally, and I've always been very aware of loneliness in others. And I just could sense something. And we therefore created Ecademy. And it was very much, it wasn't even a back of the fag packet business plan. It was literally me sitting at night time with somebody who we hired to be a coder when the kids were asleep, starting a community and in suggesting to people that wouldn't it be nice if we were friends online and not purely transactional.
And do you know from that,
and was determined for it not to become a marketplace.
you know, from that very thought, it took you 7 years to build up a business which had 650,000 subscribers, of which 25,000 were. Wasn't that amazing? Truly amazing.
It is, but I think like many, many entrepreneurs I talk to, and I know all of the people that you support, Dermot, you never ever allow yourself that moment of satisfaction. It's incredible. You know, I spend a lot of time deeply working with entrepreneurs now, and it's incredible when I just get them to take a breath and get them to recognize what they're already achieving. But we never allowed ourselves to do that, because all we could ever see was what was over the horizon, what we were aiming at, the challenges in the business, managing investors. Was very rare moments when we ever allowed ourselves that beautiful moment of saying, wow, isn't this incredible? Which is sad, isn't it? Really sad.
It is sad, but we'll come on to recognition in a minute, actually, because from that 1997 Pizza Express meeting, you then 3 years later had built a business which had a paper value of 22 million. You were doing an IPO, and actually, had that have got away, then things would have been very different. But what an amazing market, from idea to a valuation of 22 million in just 3 years. There was something very special happening both to you and Thomas, to the market, to the internet at that time.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, we played into, you know, a lot of success in business is down to timing, isn't it? And we got some of the timing really right, and then we got some of the timing really wrong. And the timing we got right was that there was only MySpace and Friends Reunited. There was no other business networks online. LinkedIn didn't start till 2002, Facebook 2004, and Twitter 2006. So we were trailblazing, which in itself gives you a lot of stress, because you're having to educate the market, educate them on ethics. And, you know, when we had to ban people because they were horrible, there was no understanding of that concept. People couldn't relate to it because internet forums, people used to get banned from them. The term trolls didn't exist, but we did end up having trolls. So it was a real trailblazing experience. So the good timing was that there was a gap, definitely. The bad timing was that we believed in friendship in business. And at the time, that was not the way that business people were thinking. Business people were still thinking very transactionally. And when LinkedIn came in 2002, they very cleverly, they started with $330 million worth of funding with Reid Hoffman, but also Reid Hoffman had been on one of our members, the founder of LinkedIn, and I think he probably observed it and could see that there was a niche for business people to just talk business. And also we were serving the small business community, and I think he realized there was a very big opportunity in the corporate and the medium to large size companies, that where the CEOs and the directors didn't have time for all this chitter chatter. And LinkedIn was formed, and it was a very much easier platform to just be transactional and seek out the people you want to do business with. And it left us with our very special niche, which was friendship in business. And I guess I remember being on a global the first social media conference that was put on, and I actually was asked to chair it, but I also then went on to the panel at one stage, because there was someone very senior from LinkedIn and somebody very senior there from Facebook, and you had Facebook on one side and LinkedIn the other, and Facebook said we'll never go into business, and LinkedIn said we'll never go social, and we were there as the bridge between the two for those people. And maybe it was niche, but I believe in niche, for those people who wanted to do both. And the psychology of it was fascinating, because we could see who could rise to the top of these communities. And the people that rose to the top weren't driven by personal success and ego. They were genuinely nice, lovely people that people get to know, like, and follow, because they trusted their skills, but also liked them and believed that those people were good people to do business with. So that's where timing's really interesting, because now if we started Ecademy, there is a huge gap in the market for that, because people want to be social and they want to be in business, and they're very aware of their mental fitness and how they need more love and support around them in business.
So, and we'll probably come on to the fact that, because you talk a bit about millennials in your book and the baby boomers, and of course we're judging Ecademy in an era where it's really, it's a baby boomers market world at that stage. The millennials do something so much and in so many ways so differently to the baby boomer generation. So we'll come on to that in a minute. But in fact, actually, in 2000, you actually had to resign as directors, didn't you?
Yeah, well, what happened was when I came up with the idea of Ecademy, I was also doing a bit of interim work at a company in Basingstoke, a distributor that had lost their sales director and wanted some support while they found a long-term one. And there was a gentleman there who he'd sold his business to this company, and the two of us occasionally had lunch together. And I told him about my idea, and in exiting his business, he had some money slopping around. And without me writing a business plan or anything, he said, I'd like to come into this business and become a shareholder and invest £250,000 into it. So when I went home to Thomas and said, my goodness, this chap wants to put in £250,000 and this could really explode what we can do, we thought, wonderful. So he came in. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs have no idea of what it's like to take on investment for the first time. They don't necessarily do due diligence on the investor. They don't think about facilitating a meeting about what the outcomes are of that investment and what the expectations are. And obviously this investors was all about the exit. And so it was all about doing things as fast as possible. And for me, my values as a mum were really strong. And I said to him, I don't want to be the CEO because I would let everybody down. I'd let my children down and I would let the shareholders down. And so I'm not right as the CEO. So he became the CEO, and very quickly a nominated advisor was brought into the fold, and we were going to go on AIM. And that was a real shock to me, really. I was on a huge roller coaster at this stage, really conflicted by what I wanted to achieve as a mum and conflicted by this ambition that I could impact more lives, but also provide our family with a really good future. So very quickly I was on the PR, you know, meeting financial PR people on newspapers, and Thomas became very involved in the business at that point, and it's because of Thomas it scaled to what it scaled to. And we were just, I can hardly explain it. It was like this magic carpet that was whisking us all over the place without really much time to think about your own place in that conversation. It became about the business, and we invested. We put our house up for more mortgage. That's when we first started to take a massive risk to our lifestyle, and we got Thomas raised £750,000 in a pitch in London, because at that time it was the dot-com boom and people were saying, who can we invest in, who can we invest in? So we ended up with 42 shareholders, and Prudential were being the underwriters of the flotation. And then it was a question of waiting and waiting, and every day it was saying who had floated, and we were number 17, number 16, number 15, number 14 before the bell would go. And then we got the call just after lastminute.com went out saying it's been pulled. There's no more flotations going on. And that was, you know, I suppose that was one of our first defining moments, which I know we're going to mention later, because it was literally like being taken to the top of the highest roller coaster in the world and then literally being dropped off it with no, and it was, and that's when our life became terrifying. And I haven't got a classic risk profile. You know, when Thomas and I met, I was 24. I had 2 endowment policies for my mortgage, a school fees policy for 2 children I hadn't even given birth to or conceived, and private health policy. I like safety. And from that point onwards in 2000, our life was a jeopardy. It was terrifying.
But do you actually then traveled Ecademy through to May 2011, when I think you probably did draw stumps after a second offer to buy the company had fallen through at that point to a German bank? And so, I mean, you know, the journey that you've been on and the tenacity and the passion, the depth of passion that you bring to it all, it just shines through. And if I can just step forward, because I am conscious we want to talk about other things during this webinar. The lovely thing in all of this is that in 2014, you were actually recognized, in fact, no correction. I think it was 2014 when you got your OBE. Yeah. For Ecademy and your contribution to entrepreneurship and social digital economy, which is a tremendous achievement. And the lovely thing, that sentence that you put that in the book, it was the spark of utter joy. And of course, that's what I felt within your book, Return Time and Time Again, is you've talked about roller coaster, but suddenly there's that, whoa, you know, suddenly, whoa, you know, we're sort of back on, you know, narrow gauge railway, and we're all traveling in the same direction. And this is truly exciting. So, you know, I think you have had a tremendous time in Ecademy. And you've also, I think, been a great founder in the world of social media. I'm sure we'll come on to that, because actually I want to talk to you about chapter 14, I think it is, no, chapter 11 in the book, which is, you know, all about skills. Chapter, which you talk about being good at social media, but not relying on it too much. So, but we'll come back to that. So, you know, we've been talking about already naturally some defining moments in your life, but we haven't through to today. So can you sort of help me on the journey and help me through some more of the defining moments that you've experienced?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that coming up with the idea was a defining moment. And the 7th of February every year for the last 22 years, it's been celebrated online. I mean, Thomas and I can even sometimes now, which is amazing, forget the 7th of February. And we then get a massive amount of alerts online on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter from members from all over the world celebrating its birth and telling us how much the Ecademy changed their lives. So every 7th of February is a defining moment of validation and belief, and also takes me back to this strong belief that at 56 at the end of this week, I still feel I want to bring that world to small business, because small businesses continue to be incredibly lonely. So the 7th of February is always a defining moment for us. Being catapulted, as we talked earlier, in 2000 to the top of our game was a very defining moment. And then I remember in 2006, so 6 years after the flotation had been pulled, when we had our first buyer talk to us, I remember we stepped off an airplane from doing a speech in Europe somewhere, and we picked up a newspaper at Heathrow, and there were our faces on the paper saying that Thomas and I were personally valued at £20 million. And see something so confronting when actually at the time we were broke, you know, we were really struggling, was really interesting as a defining moment, because it actually made you, I suppose that was one of the first times that I realized that the world of fake and the world of I suppose to a certain extent finance, where things get built up out of perspective, but the business was worth a lot of money. But it did make us appear amongst our peers and our friends and our business contacts that we were very rich people. That's not pleasant, I have to say, when it's not the truth, because you start to wear a mask then, because you can't afford to tell the truth, but you're living to a certain extent a lie, the gap between your identity and your truth, and that's very, very stressful, very stressful. And then losing everything ultimately after our final blow, which happened in 2012, is a very defining moment, when you literally lose your home, your business, your identity, the business you've loved for 14 years, but you've still got 3 kids to get through their schools and home, and you can't run away. That's very defining in terms of your own mental fitness and strength. And then taking it right forward to 2018, when I wrote my book, that was a very defining moment, because I really wasn't sure whether I wanted to continue to be a business person anymore. And you know, when I had my scary moment, which led me to go to a psychologist, which led me to do what I do now, and led me to write my book, I honestly thought, when this book is published, it's either going to confirm to the world what my deepest fear is, that I wasn't any good at business, and that would mean that I would need to go and become a midwife, was my choice. And so that was a very defining moment, and I don't think there are very many people that don't cross that chasm when you've gone through so much that you wonder whether that you need to change your life completely. But the beauty of that defining moment was people crave truth, and people have been phenomenal, including yourself, about the content of my book, and very relieved by it. And what's so beautiful is it's kept a lot of business people going when they nearly did give up themselves. So I would say those are defining moments.
Yeah, good. No, very good. This is the second book of yours I've read, because I read the first one and I gave it away. Oh. And then we agreed, because I gave it actually to my son-in-law, who's a great business, doing brilliantly well. And I just think that these younger people need, you know, something to turn to, and it's fascinating, because it makes them realize at the end of a hard day we're all human. And then, by the way, if we're all human and there are frailties as well as great strengths, how do you actually recharge for the following day? And there's so much. We'll come on to the 12 chapters in a minute, but there's just so much in your book. I love some of the quotes, by the way. to become whole, first let yourself be broken. Lao Tzu, and you know, a Chinese philosopher way back when, you know, wrote that. And I think, you know, when you break, it's almost the beginning of a dawning of a brand new era, and good will come of it. I think as human beings, we're eternally the creators. We've always got to be building things, you know, that's in the human psyche. But to go through the tough times, is both defining, but also actually quite enriching. Would you agree?
I think when I sit now amongst the entrepreneurs that I support, there isn't one person in the room that can say that life hasn't had its tough moments, whether personal tough moments or business ones. I think it would be ridiculous to live a long life and not expect to have had some moments that are your defining moments. And you know, I think we all have to be tenacious and resilient. But the word tenacity, I think, comes from how driven you are by your sense of purpose. And that's something that I really enjoy spending time with. And, you know, the strapline to the book is "Be the leader of the life you want." Because I think you can get sucked into a vortex of ambition and comparing yourself with others and looking at all the business models and all the technology and how everybody else is doing everything. And people can find themselves shaping a business that actually isn't right for them, isn't right for the way they want to deliver, doesn't necessarily play to their strengths either. And I think you become more tenacious once you've actually redefined things. And my resilience has certainly returned, and my tenacity to achieve the things that I started out looking to achieve 22, 23 years ago has definitely come back.
Which is very good, which is lovely. And then you're giving so much back to, indeed, maybe some of them must be millennials, I guess, at this stage. So you're giving so much back to other generations, which is lovely. I mean, just before we finish, I mean, the quotes in the book are really great. I mean, "Physician, heal thyself," which a lot of people will know, but it's just set in context in such a perfect position in your book. "Pouring from an empty vessel" is another, you know, cracking one. And then "Don't wait for the storm to pass, learn to dance in the rain." You know, it's just how you put it all together. It's great. Let's just move on. I mean, the chapters in your book, there are 12 of them. 9 of them have got the word personal in. There are 3 which haven't. So you are in exactly the right place in your life. They are, and of course one has no control over it. Chapter 3, being alone but not lonely. And in fact, actually, that chapter starts off, and you mentioned being a mum quite a lot during this, and you do refer to your children. And Hannah, I think, is in Bali, is she? I don't know.
She's back now. She runs her own business now. Yeah. And
so this was recounting a piece of story which said, "You're going to feel lonely, and would you like to finish the sentence?" Because, you know, being lonely, and you're obviously dishing out wonderful advice as a mum, but I'm sure at the time you were going through everything that was raging around you as well.
Yeah, so I think that one is, you might find yourself alone. You don't have to feel lonely. And I think we confuse the two things. So, you know, when we work for ourselves, we might be alone, but there are lots of ways of not being lonely. You know, and I suppose I was referring to Hannah when she would be sitting in her halls of residence on her own for the first time in her life. You know, I was saying, don't necessarily characterize that by being lonely, because you've got loads of people that love and believe in you around you. Deep loneliness is incredibly painful for people. And the thing that I've discovered with business people, and I think one of the reasons they do join our mastermind, and exactly why we wanted to start Ecademy, is this sense of other people believing in you and deeply believing in you. And that sense of validation that makes you realize that you've got some self-worth. So if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think one of the issues we have now, I'm sure most people know Maslow, but just as a quick reminder, you know, we start with our physical needs at the bottom, and then our needs for safety, then our needs for belonging, then we grow our self-esteem, and then we self-actualize, and we're able to really live a life of purpose. What I really notice is people online are leaping straight to sense of purpose, but because they haven't got themselves really deeply grounded, they're not feeding themselves. They've got financial challenges and they're in scarcity. They don't feel safe. They haven't spent time having a deep sense of belonging to anything or anyone. Their self-esteem is therefore not able to be judged because they don't know their worth to anyone, yet they're jumping up to this sense of purpose. And unfortunately, when you do that, you start to get led by ego. Ego takes over. And there was this beautiful phrase, which is another phrase you're going to love, and I wish it was in my book, which I heard from our expert that comes into our mastermind, Simon Hartley. He's a performance psychologist, and he said that, and I'll say it slowly, but it's so powerful. Ego fills the hole where self-worth should be.
Very good, very good.
Incredibly powerful, that. And then self-worth comes from a real sense of connection. And I think people aren't getting that. And Thomas beautifully, we run these dinners in London for people, and we all have always believed in small intimate groups. We had 5,000 small intimate groups that met every month around the world when we had Ecademy. And that was the power of Ecademy. It wasn't this huge global noise that people could make. It was these small intimate groups. And by bringing back our small intimate groups again in the masterminds, we are helping people to reform their self-worth. And from that, you know, these are people are tremendously skilled nowadays. What they don't know is how to value themselves. They don't know how to feel valued. They don't necessarily know how to price their skills and what the barometer is of that, how to build the right programs like millennials do now online, and how to get themselves known, but without using ego. And ego is important, but if you're driven by it, it's very dangerous. And so the first thing we have to do in the mastermind is always build people's confidence in themselves from the place where they really should be, because they're phenomenal people.
So, Penny, I'm conscious of time. We've got a few more questions to push on through. And I mean, you've written a book. Was it a huge, gargantuan achievement when you finished the last word, or did you feel it flowed off the pen easily?
It flowed very, very easily. The chapter on skills, I suppose the skills one took a bit more thought, because I really wanted to make sure that the skills that I said people really needed to have, that weren't necessarily personal choice, we just have to have them nowadays, you know, including digital skills, and understanding how to build their business models and things. That one took a little bit more brain power, I suppose, in terms of really making sure that I talked with a lot of sense in that. Everything else was very much led with my heart, with enough experience and knowledge from my journey to feel that it could be validated by anyone. But yeah, it was a great feeling when it's finished. I mean, anybody that's written a book, the final word is not necessarily the final part of the production. You go through a heck of a lot after you've finished your flow. But
well, it's a masterpiece. I mean, I think in your skills, you talk about 5 different skills, and the very first one you cite is the business model. And I think it's that sort of virtual creating. And for me, that was quite a sort of cornerstone really in thinking, because I think if you build a good business model, which clearly you had done with Ecademy, you'll build the following 150,000 users, and you'll work up around it. So you know, there's lots in there, and it's a truly great chapter. So thank you for that. I'm going to actually just move on now. I think I'd like to talk to you about what's been your experience of working with investors. You referred earlier to one that was into putting $250,000 in, but it was all about the exit. And you know, the exit, clearly that's something that Stakeholderz is seriously focused on, is getting our angels exitable companies that will get a good return in a reasonable time frame. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about that and your experience of working with investors. Looking forward to a reply.
Yeah, so the first set of investors that we had in Ecademy were very gracious and very respectful, and I think we also attracted people that could afford to lose the money. And I know that sounds weird, but you know, with the government now has SEIS and EIS, and I think there's always a risk, isn't there? Always a risk in a business. And so they never really gave us too much pressure, because I've got 95 out of 100 on a test, on a Big 5 psychometric test on things. 95 out of 100 on conscientiousness, which means I really can't let anyone down. I'm very honest, I'm very transparent, and I can't let people down. So for me personally, the stress of an investor, which included a couple of members of my family and a couple of friends that put in, was really hard. I mean, to the point where I really didn't want to live my life, because not suicidally, I mean, in terms of, I felt I couldn't have a holiday, I couldn't buy my children what I wanted to do at Christmas time, because I felt very much under the microscope of that investment. I felt personally that pressure. And so that was a personal pressure for me. And I think everybody's different in terms of founders. I've spoken to other founders that say, oh, I never felt that. But I'm giving you my personal take on that experience. But they were very gracious and wrote off, you know, against tax, any losses, etc. The second investor came in slightly, there was slight deception in my, I believe, in terms of the way they pitched to me that they wanted to invest, because that second business, Digital Youth Academy, was actually a really brilliant idea. It was to bring the digital marketing apprenticeship to market. And I really was very wedded with the support of young people being put into small businesses to support the growth of small business, but also to give young businesses a place in the business market. Because in 2011, when I came up with this idea, all over the newspapers, they were talking about how bad young people were. They had a lot of bad PR. Tottenham riots had happened. And I really wanted to be on the side of the young person who were born digital. And so again, very emotionally driven business, but also it had a huge business plan behind it. What happened, I was in scarcity when I took in that person. Not scarcity of skills or passion, but scarcity financially. So this investor put the money in, and I didn't consider going out to other investors, you know, basically seeing who else I could get. And they changed their investment to loan notes right at the last minute, after I had got a lot of clients on board, a lot of colleges that were going to sign up to become the distributors of our new apprenticeship. So I was really held to ransom in that boardroom over the fact that it was the point at which the business needed a bit more money. I basically was given the ultimatum that either I reduced my shares down to virtually nothing, or they would draw on those loans and the business would be closed because it was insolvent. That was very painful, because I'd already gone through an experience that was pretty hard with the Ecademy, and to then have that experience was horrible. And it meant we had to do a rapid sale of the business. I found a buyer because I couldn't continue to work on a board with people like that. And the business did centre around my brand and my knowledge and my connections. So these aren't great experiences, but I think they're a word of warning to people around how some investors.
Well, I could counter that slightly, because we've got a little investment round out for stakeholders. And I have to say, I count myself blessed with the numbers of investors involved. Yeah. And there are, admittedly, we're all about bringing the next generation of really advanced state technology businesses to market. And they are patient capital personified. So they're on the journey, they understand the business model, and they're right behind it. So, you know, I think that generally the experience is good. I think if you need the capital investors is right, but you're sort of touching on so many of the really valuable lessons from someone who's obviously been through it a number of times. So thank you for that.
That's all right, Dermot. I mean, I'm doing this interview because I've got to know you really well, and I really love your values, and I know what you've achieved over many, many years. And I've also been to some of your events, and I think it's there is an intimacy and a personalization built into the way that you're matching people that I think is really important and powerful. And that's where I missed that, because I was doing things out on my own.
And that's really kind of you to say that, but I think we do strive for engagement with our investor base and the ventures. And if we put the two together and the conversations flow, then the magic then does happen.
And everybody's protected then, it's, protected as much as they can be because the information flow is there.
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to just move on now and talk about mentoring, because we've touched on your masterclass.
Yeah.
We've touched on your fantastic background and career, and yes, some ups and downs. And now you're turning a very interesting program into a pretty interesting evolution, if you like, for some very interesting entrepreneurs. Just a little bit more on that. You've already covered it, I know, but I just want to make sure that we've given this really important subject the right airtime that it deserves this morning.
So when I came out after my book launched and people started contacting me and saying, Penny, you're the sort of coach that I would like, I thought, well, maybe I will do a bit of personal coaching. That sounds lovely. And I did it a little bit. And then I realized that back to this belief around small intimate groups, I'm not the mastermind. I believe that there are phenomenal amounts of skilled people in this country and beyond that are just not fulfilling their potential because there's just some stuff around their mindset or their business skills. And maybe a lack of accountability and discipline now, where if they went into a group of people and where it was a completely transparent, everybody's speaking their truth, we could help them over that year become the potential that they really are. And I suppose to a certain extent, this is helping people to prepare to scale. So interestingly, a couple of investors have placed their CEOs into our mastermind, which is really exciting for us. These are people who, having somewhere to go once a month into a room and talk to other business owners and also learn new skills and talk about business models and talk about the market and do live R&D on their ideas, but also bring in amazing people from, a lead generation expert who understands Facebook and LinkedIn and helps you to really generate the leads, through to performance psychologists, behavioral psychologists, even the most phenomenal mindfulness expert who helps them to understand how to balance their mind and not catastrophize things and go into stress and anxiety. So it's beautiful. We've now about to launch our third mastermind group, and we'll be launching probably 3 of those in 2021. This year we'll launch another 2. So March we start one, and in September. So we have dinners and we have breakfasts. I've also launched a little scorecard, a diagnostic tool called the Business is Personal Health Check, and it's 42 yes/no questions, and people get out of 7 categories about the holistic way that they handle their business. So I'm sort of building this Business is Personal brand out, and who knows, I think one day people are coming to me asking if they can run it in Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, Exeter. Who knows, maybe I will end up scaling these small intimate groups out again, and we'll maybe achieve the dream that Thomas and I set out for. Yeah.
Lovely, 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 lovely. So just moving on, because again, conscious of time, what do you think the reader will learn from this book?
I think critically how to take care of themselves. The subject of mental health is abound. You can't turn the telly on. It's very prevalent, and I'm being hired as a speaker a lot into corporates, which amazes me because my spot is entrepreneurs, but I think this mental health agenda is everywhere. But one of the things that I think is we can't point our finger at everything and say it's everything else is to blame. We have to take responsibility for our mental fitness. And that's the bit that I always felt I was mentally healthy, but I wasn't mentally fit enough. And so I want people to really consider their mental fitness and take responsibility for it like we do our physical fitness. I also think it will help people relate to other entrepreneurs, and if you consider what is the line of normal, and a lot of us feel like we're subnormal with our internal dialogue and our stresses, our day-to-day stresses. And I think that if I can bring up the line of normal to maybe you are normal, and if you want to be amazing, maybe you just start to realize that you are normal, but maybe work on your own sort of vulnerabilities and things that are hurting you, and take care of yourself. And also I I'm really excited by the fact that some investors and some software as a service companies are buying the book and giving it to their clients, because their clients are small businesses, and it's helping them to relate more to the mindset of the small business, which I think is really important, because the way that companies treat small business, the way that small businesses treat one another sometimes is not good. And I think we're an ecosystem in this country that can boost the economy the more we actually have empathy and support one another in a greater way. And so I'm hoping that they get that from it too.
Very good. Thank you. Well, Penny, nearly there, but what's next for you then? Would you do any non-executive director work?
I would love to do more non-exec work. Thomas does that, and I would love to. And I think unofficially I do a lot of that. I've been asked to be an advisor on boards, so I would love to do that. I love the thought of these masterminds and building them out, and building these small intimate groups again or across the world would be a wonderful dream. But you know, this time we're building it organically. It's slower, but you feel more in control maybe when you build things organically. But I think there'll come a point in the next couple of years that we'll be out looking for investors and the right type of investor again to scale something that I'm observing is quite beautiful and very much needed again.
And are you able to talk about one of your other ventures, which is sort of bricks and mortar related?
Yeah, I just spend time, like many people, in Starbucks or Cafe Nero or Costa, sitting on my own, but I want to get out of the house. And I don't want to sit in serviced offices because I like working at home. I've got a dog, and so when I can work at home and I'm not seeing clients, I want to be at home. But I like the thought of getting out and belonging to a community in my local town. So I had this idea of creating essentially cafes for business people that creates community on the high street, a private club, but it feels like a business lounge. And in there, we build community, we provide some skills, we support mental fitness, and that's my dream. That's what I want to do.
Perfect.
And that's one day I think we'll do it.
Well, I'm sure you will. There's no question about that in my mind. You will. Penny, great, fantastic to spend time with you this morning. Truly epic. You know, been a wonderful time for our listeners, and it just remains for me to say thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Brilliant at interviewing. I loved it, Dermot. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. Speak soon. Bye.
No, bye.